You are listening to
Pop Culture Pasta.
Pop Culture Pastor.
Okay, Cody. We'll just start off this way.
Okay.
Because I've got bad news. We're, unfortunately, everything's really stagnated. The listenership, everything of Pop Culture Pastor is really stagnated. We got to shake things up a bit. And what I need to do is I'm going to gender switch you.
Okay.
So we're going to bring in someone else, a girl. We'll call her Cody. Because Cody...
It is a universal name.
Yeah.
I've known several female Codys.
Basically what I'm trying to say is you're fired.
It's justified.
I'm just kidding. Cody's not going anywhere. Not the name anyways.
We'll see.
No, I just wanted to start off that way because of this first story we're going to talk about. By the way, hi. This is Pop Culture Pastor, the podcast. My name's Dave. Cody's here.
I am.
Which Cody? We'll find out.
All the Codys.
This ends up being one of the things we talk about a lot. And listen, as far as pop culture reporters go, and I'll lump us into that.
That's us.
As far as that goes, we care far less about this than like some of your more political outlets. Mm-hmm. Like the people that get caught up in the culture of arguing and all that and basically just react to things. I wouldn't even say it's really that they believe so strongly in something. They're just fighting for clicks.
Very much so.
But at times we have brought it up in certain ways where we were against it and where we were for it. When it makes sense for the character, we've been like, hey, that would be kind of cool. When it doesn't make sense, we've said, hey, that doesn't make sense. I think what I'm going to argue is that I'm about to give you one of the latter.
And I'm going to give you both.
Of course Cody is, because Contrarian Cody is in the house.
Always have been, always will be.
Let's just take a side journey for a second. How did you make it through public school? Like, I just imagine you getting beat up all the time for being contrarian for no reason whatsoever.
Maybe the contrarian didn't come out till college.
I don't know, man. I got body slammed in the 3rd grade by a girl named Michelle. And that was the end of my contrarian days.
You had it coming.
I probably did.
Also, I know when to pick and choose my battles.
Listen, Michelle was a monster before I get any emails, okay? The funny thing was she grew early. Like, she was huge in 3rd grade. She was a giant. And then I remember seeing her as an adult and talking to her, and we were laughing and sharing stories. And she's never grew since then. She's like 5'6".
Not a bad height.
But she was 5'6" in 3rd grade, and she body slammed the nerd out of me. Anyways, that's a completely separate story. I want to talk about Netflix's highly anticipated Chronicles of Narnia film franchise, which is starting off with a film adaptation of The Magician's Nephew. One, do you have thoughts on that? Because Magician's Nephew traditionally has not been the first one in the series as it came out or whatever. There's 2 ways to look at it. There's the way it falls chronologically, and then there's the way it comes out publication-wise, which The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is always like kind of the introductory first story. But Magician's Nephew is a prequel of sorts.
Yes.
So they're starting with Magician's Nephew. What do you think about that?
Tells me they at least think they're going to have several movies. Yeah. Or several seasons if they're doing a series. I don't know. They keep going back and forth with how they're projecting this.
Yeah, it's interesting because, well, we'll see. Here's where I want to talk about, though, because this is the part where I'm like, oh, no. An offer has been made to Meryl Streep. Oh, okay.
Allegedly.
We're like, oh, right, Meryl Streep, great actress.
Thespian extraordinaire.
Going to be awesome. Is she going to be the Ice Queen? No. They have offered her the role of Aslan, the Great Lion. Streep, according to this article, is in talks to portray Aslan, who will be female in the series. So she will not be a lion. She will be a lioness. Now, listen. I can already hear everybody listening to this. There's like a din. There's like a like this is not a man-woman thing. Okay? There are several roles, even in this story, where they could gender swap them. I wouldn't care. But Aslan is a very specific character, especially if you know the lore, if you know who C.S. Lewis is, the author.
Clive Staples Lewis?
Yeah, that guy. Like, listen, his imagery, we're not Tolkien, subtle, man. You read Lord of the Rings, you got to dig for the Christ imagery. It's in there, but it's super subtle and deep. C.S. Lewis, not so deep. It's pretty surface, man. Aslan is the lion of Judah, who sacrifices himself, then comes back. And then when he comes back, he's going to take everyone to live with him in a special land.
That's nice.
Yeah. So I have some thoughts, Cody. But I figured I would let you go first. Because you know my central problem with this is, listen, if it's God is not male or female in our spirituality, our faith, our religion. He just is. I am. Okay?
Both male and females are created in his image or in God's image.
But I think where I want to be very clear here is that Aslan is not a stand-in for God. He is a stand-in for Jesus, who is God, but also is an individual. It's very complicated. Let's not get into that. But he is Jesus, who is definitely a dude. He's the Lion of Judah. Cody, I cede the floor.
Yes, it is definitely a Christ fill-in, Aslan is. For me, it kind of depends, even though technically Netflix now owns the rights to all of Narnia, at least for film adaptation, and I'm not even sure if they don't own the publishing rights.
It seems to be the way it's going now.
But with that being said, if the Lewis estate was like, he would have been okay with it. I'm okay with it. Now, to go back to the theological perspective, you either have to say, like, Aslan is a Christ-like fill-in, and you can easily go the lioness way, and you can go through, especially the Old Testament. Old Testament has imagery where God definitely has feminine attributes. Clear back in the book of Genesis, creation story. Like the words that are used for God's title is something that is very feminine attribute. And then in Psalms and Proverbs, you get the wisdom of the Lord is lady wisdom, God Sophia. But if you are a purist of the IP, I can see you being like, Aslan has a very particular fill-in that he is doing. He is Christ in this story, not a Christ-like figure.
Yeah, again, not subtle.
Also, the male lions are more fluffy.
Yeah, they have manes.
I think I would, if I was a kid, I might be less scared of a male lion than a female lion because it looks like a soft kitty. But then the females, they're just like, I got a mouthful of teeth.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I'm not someone who's like, I am so dedicated to this IP. How dare you? You know, like, for me, I'm just looking at this as a business decision. Like, if I'm Netflix and I understand who the main fandoms are for the Chronicles of Narnia, I'm like, hey, Greta, as in Greta Gerwig, the director, what are we doing? You can't do that. Like, what are we doing? That's going to make a bunch of people mad, which basically comes from, this is where I'm coming from, of like, why? Why would you do this? This doesn't, like, if the answer is well, now that Narnia's been done a couple times, I just want to set it apart from the other ones. I mean, I suppose that makes a little sense, I guess. But like, I don't know, man. Liam Neeson's still alive, y'all. Like, go get him again. Nobody will care.
Because honestly, I think you just need a strong voice.
Side note, who's the silliest guy you could get for that part, and why is it John Mulaney? John Mulaney as the voice of Aslan. That's where I'm at.
Otherwise, Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, dude, sometimes I think we're just outthinking ourselves.
I kind of wonder if maybe there is a close friendship and that the friendship is like, we can do this. We can make it work. Glenn Close in Hook famously was a dude.
So you think Meryl's going to come in and play it masculine?
Maybe.
That would be entertaining, I suppose.
Or do a portrayal where Aslan portrays differently to different people at different times.
I like Greta Gerwig. I like the Barbie movie. I thought it was great.
Loved the Barbie movie. Almost got a Barbie movie tattoo.
It had things to say without being real overt about it. Like, it wasn't subtle by any means, but it was smart. It told a story. And that's the thing. It's like, there are ways to do this. There are ways to say something real about life that you have a problem with or that, that you're opposed to. There are ways to put that in your story and do it well. Severance is a great example. Like, Severance has a lot to say, but it's deep and it's embedded in the story, which is all we really want. Tell me a story. Marvel and Star Wars, which we both dearly love, have pretty much wrecked their brands by doing this poorly.
Get wrecked.
And so much so that when people let them know they were doing it poorly, they got scared, they became cowards and started making movies like Captain America: Brave New World, where they have nothing to say.
You don't need anything to say.
You needed something to say. He's a black Captain America. We can talk about it. There would be issues, and you can definitely get into it because that would be the interesting part. But instead, we're not going to talk about it at all. Here's the Red Hulk. Did we mention the Red Hulk? There's the Red Hulk. We paid a lot of money to the CGI guys to make the Red Hulk.
Good job with the Red Hulk.
So basically, I don't want Narnia to become that.
And again, this report is alleged. Netflix hasn't announced it.
They are talking to her.
And I would talk to Meryl Streep anytime I had the opportunity to talk to Meryl Streep. So Meryl Streep's just an icon.
That's a solid point.
And she's dating Martin
Short.
Yep.
Not Martin Scorsese.
There's too many Martys out there.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that even Meryl Streep may be a fan of the Chronicles of Narnia series, and she's like, I can't do that. Like, that doesn't make any sense, Greta.
I trust in Greta.
All right. Let's move on to something else we'll probably argue about. I don't feel strongly about this, but it made enough headlines that it feels like we got to talk about it. Did you watch Saturday Night Live last week?
No. Never have, never will, buddy.
Why not? Do you watch the clips?
I occasionally. It has to be a really good sketch for me to be like, we're back. But like the Will Ferrell years really did it for me. I'm like, I'm over it. I'm over it.
Yeah, I haven't watched Saturday Night Live, like a full episode, since probably I was in high school. But the problem that with Saturday Night Live is it often fell into this place here in the last 10 years that we're talking about, where they wanted to say something politically. And like, let's get something very straight. Saturday Night Live skewered everybody back in the day. They didn't just do a George Bush or George W. Bush impressions. They did Bill Clinton impressions. They were equal opportunity. That seems to have changed ever so slightly here in the last 10 years, where they're more willing to make fun of conservatives, which I'm an independent intentionally, so I don't really care. But again, when I feel like you're just beating the drum for a side and you're not really doing satire, then I kind of like, whatever. Anyway, Saturday Night Live tends to have this reputation now. While also, I felt a few times in the last year when I've seen skits, especially when they had Nate Bargatze on. And
he has big eyes.
And then who was the guy that used to be on the cast that got fired and then came back to guest host recently?
Oh, Shane Gillis.
Shane Gillis. Specifically, when those two dudes were on, there were some really funny skits that came out of those. Maybe like the best in years type skits. Shane Gillis had a funny commercial, which they used to do funny. The commercials used to be hilarious. And then Nate Bargatze with maybe one of the Mount Rushmore of Saturday Night Live skits. It might be up there as one of the top 4 or 5 in the George Washington skit, which is hilarious. Anyways, I say all this because last Saturday, something very interesting happened. They had Morgan Wallen on, which...
That was a choice.
First of all, I know nothing really about the cast of Saturday Night Live right now. I know not much about Morgan Wallen, but what I do know tells me, oh, that's like oil and water. Is that going to work? So maybe it didn't work. They got through the show, but then at the end where they're playing the saxophone music, and everyone's glad handing and they're rubbing elbows and they're saying good job you. He just sort of walked off the stage right in front of the camera. Never seen it before. It was very weird. And people had thoughts, including our friend Keenan Thompson, who said this: I don't know what goes through people's minds when they decide to do stuff like that. I don't know if he understood the assignment or not, or if he was really feeling a certain kind of way. You see somebody before you get a chance to say hi or say good job or anything like that, they just dipping. I thought maybe he had to go to the potty or something. Seems like a complicated individual, I guess. What did you think of this? First of all, do you have thoughts on Morgan Wallen in general?
So my initial thoughts were close to yours, but I actually do know some of the cast, including Bowen Yang, who is in Wicked as one of the classmates, close friends with Ariana Grande in that movie. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, I don't know who made this call, besides maybe they're trying to mend some political bridges. And I'm like, well, hopefully this goes good. Then when the clip started surfacing, I'm like, dude, don't act like you don't know that you're supposed to stay there the whole time that the show's going off air. Everyone and their mom knows. You stay, you shake hands. If you don't want to talk to certain people, you don't have to talk to them. There's 30 people on the stage. Talk to one of the other 30 people. And
I needed Morgan Wallen hugging Bowen Yang because just for the culture. I just needed it for the culture, Cody.
Yeah, and as soon as he walked off stage and I saw it, I'm like, he's trying to earn back some PR with his brand of followers, because most likely most of his fans aren't watching SNL. I don't know many people around these parts that are watching SNL.
Oh, what? Morgan Wallen fans? They're not watching the Saturday Night Live? No? That's
probably
not.
Not unless someone important to them is on it. Maybe a Nate Bargatze. But he and then when he made the post, going back to God's country, I did appreciate what Keenan had to say about that in particular, where, are you saying that we're not all in God's country? that there's certain areas God's not covering. Like, if you're going to say that God is in control in overall things, and we're living in the same country, you were in God's country, buddy. You were there.
Yeah, that you can chalk that one up to God's country, especially for people from the Midwest, is just a reference to the Midwest. Now, is it sort of thoughtless to say out loud in mixed company? Like someone from the coast or whatever, telling them that this is God's country. Yeah. But it's not something we usually tell to them. It's usually around us parts.
So flying back from New York to Tennessee to talk about God's country, when I think West Virginia might actually be closer to New York. You were almost in heaven, buddy.
Also, is God's country about making money?
Yep.
Because apparently Morgan Wallen, less than 48 hours after making that social media post, is now selling merch. Guess what's on the merch, Cody? Get me to God's country. You can buy a shirt for $45.
You can send me one for free and we'll see if I wear it.
And this is where it all comes back to. No matter what you think about these people, these celebrities, at the end of the day, you know what it's really all about? Like, listen, I got 8 texts and 6 emails from Cory Booker yesterday.
I got a text message from Cory.
And you know what they were all wanting? Money. Because he filibustered. He made headlines, they took advantage of it, and they made money, which is really what this country's about. It's really not about your, whatever it is they've tricked you into thinking it's about. It's not about that. So I'll just say that. I want to back away from Cory Booker because I'm sure he has real thoughts on the subject. But Morgan Wallen probably does not. Whatever it is you think that was about, him walking off the Saturday Night Live stage, I am dubious.
Capitalist Cody says it was a great financial venture.
I'm tending to agree with Capitalist Cody on this one. Let's put it this way. I bet his Instagram post, Get Me Back to God's Country, right after he walked off that stage, I bet that was scheduled. Let's just put it that way. That whole thing was a sham, but whatever. 2 bits of annoying news.
Sweet.
Now let's get back to something kind of cool. I was reading this article about Anthony Mackie.
My friend.
Yeah.
Captain.
And if you want to get your faith restored in celebrities not walking off stages early and being antisocial, Anthony Mackie did a interview with the Pivot podcast. Are you familiar with that?
I am vaguely.
Yeah, that's Ryan Clark, the former football player.
Pittsburgh Steeler great.
Yeah, and he made a lot of headlines. All the headlines were between him and Andrew Schultz this week because there were some racial things they were talking through, which was kind of cool, actually. I watched a lot of that, but that got all the headlines, not this interview he did with Anthony Mackie, who said something not nearly as controversial, but still a little challenging in this day and age. 46 years old, Anthony, he said this: "We're lying to our kids. We tell them if they do right and they make good grades, they go to the programs, they become successful. If you work hard enough, your work will pay off." And that's not true. He said in many cases, success is given and not earned. And he goes on to say here, Cody, something that a lot of us think and don't say out loud a lot, which is more about who you know, the people you know, the people around you in your life, who can give you a heads up, a hand up, like that it's luck a lot of times. And I thought, that is refreshingly honest, sir. Refreshingly honest. Because,
too honest. Because
when you're successful, successful people don't usually say this, because then it feels like you're hurting their legacy, like I don't deserve to be here. So to hear an actor who just headlined a Marvel movie, albeit one that I just bashed about 10 minutes ago, wasn't his fault.
No.
To hear someone being so refreshingly honest, I thought, man, that's awesome. That's good stuff, because I'm not trying to tell my kids that, hey, if you work hard enough, you can get anything you want in life. That's not what I tell my kids. And I've always kind of wondered why we collectively as a culture seem to make that a true thing.
So I think that the motivation is pure when we do, just because typically if you're working hard and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, the likelihood of you being in a place where you get that lucky break goes up. If you're goofing off, if you're not doing anything productive, if you start going with a crowd that leads you down a darker path, those chances go significantly down. Most of us don't get like huge lucky breaks, but we might find a place of content. And nothing wrong with that. But just working day in, day out, and keeping your values as close to pure as possible, you're going to be getting a lot more of those opportunities, a lot more of those breaks. And like even in my profession, me just working in mental health for a long time and sowing good seeds along the way, people were like, oh, you might become a good therapist one day. What if we start a program that helps people that already work for us become therapists, and you get to be one of the first few people? And I'm like, okay, that's a blessing. It was not because I had necessarily fully lucked into it. I had put in the work along the way, and it put me in the right position to be noticed.
Yeah.
And so I do think when we say this to kids, it is just because we know your best chance is to be doing this and to hopefully get noticed.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to be clear. I think there is an amount of work to hone your craft, whatever it may be. Where what I like it is when someone who has a voice, obviously Anthony Mackie has a voice. I'm reading this out of a news article. So his voice is important. It gets delivered to the masses. When someone has a voice, I find it refreshing that they say something that is true that we hardly ever talk about, which is this. Everything we get, every bit of success or whatever we define as success comes along with one, yes, work most of the time. Maybe not the Rizzler.
Yeah.
There are people who seem to go viral who just kind of, it's like falling into a hole. They just fell into it. Those exist, but not much. But most people who enjoy success, there's two things happening. One, they worked, they honed whatever it is they're having success at. But two, and this is the part where I love when we recognize this, and this is going to be different depending on what your view on spirituality is. It's either luck or it's blessing. But I'm here to tell you it's the same thing. Regardless, if you're not a believer in any religion and you say it's luck, then yeah, it's luck. If you're a spiritual person, you say it's blessing, then yeah, I'm saying yes, it's blessing. They're one and the same in this instance. That's what I'm saying, is that, talent is a weird thing because you can hone it, but you were born with it.
Yes.
LeBron's not the best player ever to play in the NBA because he worked harder than everybody else that ever played in the NBA. That's not it. He's the best player in the NBA because genetically he's a freak. He's 6'10" and can move like someone who's 6 foot. And he's longevity and everything else. Now, he gets credit for doing the work to last this long.
Yep.
But there are things that he was born with that I think even LeBron would tell you. It's either, but depending, I don't know what he believes. He would either say there's a little bit of luck or there's a little bit of blessing or a lot bit.
And we're going to talk about in the main portion of our pod, someone that was overly talented and didn't get all the credit or the breaks that he should have gotten, in my opinion. And so, yeah, blessings, luck, it's a weird thing.
Yeah. Let's go talk about him.
Yes.
We should go talk about him. We've spent enough time doing the news. We'll be right back to talk about this Legends episode. Okay, so up until, 48 hours ago?
Yes.
We were going to do a Be Kind Rewind.
Over Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I was ready to sing.
You were ready to sing?
I literally have the soundtrack to Scott Pilgrim versus the World and the extended soundtrack that has the Beck originals that Sexpa Bomb plays. But it wasn't in the cards.
Don't worry. We will still do a Be Kind Rewind on Scott Pilgrim versus the World because it's a great movie and it's fun. And I think the subject of this podcast would have appreciated what you just said. You had a love for the art.
Yes.
And this dude had a love for the art. And his name was Val Kilmer. Now, if you've listened to this pod for any length of time, you know that Cody is a Val Kilmer superfan.
Quite literally.
Like, I'm not even making this up. Like, there are characters on this podcast who are just super fans of certain, Geek Jackson loves Kurt Russell.
He does.
And it's something I don't quite understand because I don't feel like I have a super fandom for a person. I've got it for movies, for certain IP and materials. But Cody, pretty much from the beginning, has made it pretty clear. There will be no Val Kilmer slander on this podcast.
Exactly. There never should be in any area of life in general, honestly.
So we did a poll for the Be Kind Rewind. We were about to announce what the winning thing was. It was Scott Pilgrim versus the World when the news broke that Val Kilmer had passed away. And so immediately when I saw it, I was like, oh no.
Oh no, indeed.
We've got to talk about Val Kilmer. So today we thought, well, let's pivot. We're going to go into a Legends episode because Val Kilmer was a legend. And we're going to dive into the life and the legacy of Val Kilmer, an actor whose career spanned iconic films such as Top Gun, Tombstone, Real Genius, The Doors. But a dude was also so much more interesting. He was so much deeper than the roles.
Oh, yeah.
Gifted Juilliard student to Hollywood star to a man who battled with health and faith. And all that's become kind of central to his story. And so I wanted right off the top, what's your personal take on just Val Kilmer? When you think of Val Kilmer, what do you think of? Is there a role? Well, what is it about Val Kilmer that as young Cody is growing that he just becomes someone of interest for young Cody?
So I'll start off with a text message I received yesterday from my mom. It was late in the evening, and she's like, did you hear that Val Kilmer died? And I'm like, yep. And I told her that this house has been in a state of mourning ever since. And she's like, I figured it would hit you hard once I learned that he was Batman. That is the pivotal role that I definitely grew up loving Val Kilmer for, was being Batman. In a Batman movie that definitely isn't the best Batman movie.
No.
Although I would argue he plays a great Bruce. And in some rankings, he usually is interchanged for first or second with Christian Bale as who makes the best Bruce Wayne. Michael Keaton doesn't look like Bruce Wayne. That's just a fact. That's just a fact, people. But I also grew up watching Willow. Top Gun, I always rooted for Iceman. I never rooted for Maverick. As I got older into my teen years, Tombstone was on a lot, and you just have to admire how much scene stealing Val Kilmer does with this cast of actors, which I watched an interview last night, and he was talking about Tombstone, and he's like, 7 or 8 of these guys literally are leading men in movies. They have that name, they have that persona, and they have gone on and done it. And yet he shines in the midst of all this stardom. In my teen years, I was also a huge fan of The Doors, the band, and then the movie. And I'm like, what can't this Val Kilmer do?
He seriously loves The Doors, man. His apartment, before he got married, all black light.
Maybe. And to his credit, like, the original members of The Doors were watching a sneak peek at the movie, and we're listening to the singing, and they're like, oh, you guys used Jim's vocals. Nope, that's Val. That's Val Kilmer, not Jim Morrison. Come on, Doors.
That's amazing.
And then you just go through all these movies, and growing up, I didn't realize that Val Kilmer was the Prince of Egypt. And, like, quite literally, he does the voice of Moses, does the voice of God in the burning bush, and that is an all-time classic animated movie. Watch it if you haven't watched it, kids. And then I just launched into, like, his movies as an adult. The Ghost in the Darkness, Real Genius, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Deja Vu, The Saint, loosely based on my real life story, Top Secret. Like, and you look at these movies and you see that he brings something extra to each of these roles. Whether it is like a movie that you've never heard of and are shocked that he's in, like, he's not phoning it in. He famously was in that awful movie called The Island of Dr. Moreau. And so in his documentary, he talks about how he took the role just so he can act with Marlon Brando.
Only to find out Marlon doesn't do that anymore.
Yeah, Marlon
Acting?
doesn't act.
No.
And that was disappointing to him. And you can see that he never, like, phones it in like Marlon Brando at the end, where Brando's just like, I'm here to collect a paycheck and just put white paint on my face. Call that acting.
Yeah. What becomes clear, especially after he passed and the tributes started pouring in, was that Val Kilmer was never someone who would phone anything in. Like, this dude, we just talked about Anthony Mackie teaching your kids that it's not all about hard work. It is about who you know. And there is definitely an aspect on Val's career where he's never really he's never the quarterback, someone said. He's always the lineman. And so maybe there's something to that, but because I don't know that anybody was working harder than Val Kilmer. This was a response by Michael Mann after news broke. He said, Michael Mann, who's an incredible director.
Of The Heat.
Of The Heat, yeah. After so many years of Val battling disease and maintaining his spirit, this is tremendously sad news. I always marveled at the range, the brilliant variability within the powerful current of Val's possessing and expressing character. Josh Brolin, Josh Gad celebrated kind of his fiery creative energy. Frank Whaley, who maybe not a lot of people know, but he's been a director after being a young actor. He acted alongside Kilmer in The Doors. He posted this on his social media. He said, I was fortunate to have shared many adventures with Val along the way. It was life-altering for me as an actor. Whaley also directed Kilmer in his 1999 directorial debut, Joe the King, for which he told Rolling Stone that will always be in Val's debt for his brilliant work in my film, where he simply disappeared into the role of Bob Henry, a role I wrote based on my own father. His commitment to his craft was mystifying to behold. Val was a truly gifted artist and a beautiful human being. I especially like this one. You were just talking about The Doors. Jennifer Tilly, who actress, in a post on X, wrote this about crossing paths with Val Kilmer at an audition for The Doors. She said, quote, it was kind of a cattle call. They paired together potential Jims with potential Pamelas, and they were running behind, so we were spilling out of the casting office, sitting on the porch, the lawn, the driveway. All of a sudden, a 60s convertible came screeching up, blaring Doors music at top volume, and a guy jumped out and strode inside. He had wild hair, he was barefoot, shirtless, and wearing nothing but a pair of tight leather pants. We all looked at each other like, who is this guy? Now, these are actors. Who is this guy? We were more than a little shook by the sheer audacity of his entrance. Well, of course, it was Val Kilmer, and from that minute on, nobody else stood a chance. R.I.P. King. Like, that's from Piers.
Yes.
Like, writing about him like he's mystical. Like, that's the kind of guy he was. And I mean, I've got more tributes, and some of them, they're so good. Kevin Smith. I thought I would read this one because maybe comes from a place where more I came from, because Kevin Smith is Gen X guy.
Yep.
He said, like many Gen X kids, I first encountered Val Kilmer in the Martha Coolidge movie Real Genius.
Love that movie.
In which he played Chris Knight, a brilliant Bugs Bunny-ish college kid who runs circles around the faculty and his enemies while brimming with charm and a sly sense of humor. I always thought this movie was like actually him. Like, if there was a role that seemed to me that I kind of placed on Val Kilmer as true character, it was this role. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's right or not, but that's just how I've always thought of him, as Chris Knight in Real Genius. Kevin Smith goes on. Years later, when I met Val via old-fashioned pen-to-paper correspondence, he wrote me a letter to say how much he loved Dogma.
Yes.
I was delighted to discover that he wasn't playing. He was Chris Knight. And he was Doc Holliday. He was Batman. He was Jim Morrison. He was Nick Rivers. He was Iceman. He was Mad Mardigan. He was Gay Perry. He was John Holmes. And he was Moses. He was Mark Twain. And years after he sent me that lovely letter, he was my blunt man. They tell you to never meet your heroes, but they were wrong when it came to Val. He was everything you hoped he was and nothing you expected. Thank you, Val, for a lifetime of movie memories, including on one of my own flicks. You truly were our Huckleberry. It's good stuff from Kevin Smith. And there's so many more. Bob Dylan.
Yes. So I didn't realize Val Kilmer and Bob Dylan were close, but yesterday going down several wormholes, like Bob Dylan's name kept coming up, and I'm like, that would have been a cool, like, hangout to be sitting in on.
You imagine sitting in a room, coffee shop, you're at a table with Bob Dylan and Val Kilmer. Bob said this: every time I run into Val Kilmer, I can't help myself. I say, "Why, Johnny Ringo, you look like somebody just walked in your grave." And Val always says, "Bob, I'm not Johnny Ringo. That's just a role I played in a movie." Now, Bob Dylan's recounting this story. He played Doc Holliday, not John. That's a line he said. Bob Dylan goes on. He could be right. He could be wrong. I think he's wrong, but he says it in such a sincere way. You have to think he's right, which is very Bob Dylan-like. There was a couple more I wanted to share. Well, no, not a couple more. I wanted to share this. You know what? I'll save that for the end.
We're saving things now.
Yeah, that's from Val himself, the last email that went out to that. But we'll save that for the very end.
I think that would be fitting.
So you can often tell when someone passes. I find this. Are there tributes which are kind of generic, which is, oh, he was so good at blah, 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 but they're not really personal. I think that's telling. Whereas when someone dies and you get these personal stories, these memories that people have, like, that's a sign of someone who was just so uber present.
Yeah.
Which is amazing, because everything you hear about Val is he was so into the role that it wasn't him that was present, but maybe, just maybe it was. When you think about Val Kilmer, Cody, especially being described as like kind of the most unsung leading man, is it fair to say his talents were underappreciated?
So I had to look this up because I couldn't believe it was true. He had 0 Oscar nominations. Zero.
That's insane.
Including the year he did Tombstone.
That is insane. I am angry.
As you should be. And so there are several movies that I would have thought that he would have gotten an Oscar nomination for. Tombstone being at the very top of them. If the Oscars were like they are today, I think The Ghost in the Darkness he would have at least gotten a nomination for, because it's like one of those indie, like, super intelligent films.
Such an underrated movie.
And yeah, nope. Doesn't get an Oscar nomination. Doesn't get an Oscar nomination for being Alexander the Great's dad. Doesn't get Oscar nominations for anything. Just criminally underrated. And like, as the years go on, especially post Alexander, you don't see him in big blockbuster movies anymore. But it is amazing that, like, he has a sense of humor that I was watching this show that was on BBC with Stephen Merchant and who's the Ricky Gervais. And it's their show that they're doing together, and Warwick, the guy that plays Willow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also R2-D2.
Yes.
No. Wicket the Ewok.
Yes. Yeah. He is pitching to them making a Willow 2, but he has a guy in a Batman mask standing right next to him. And he's like, I have Batman with me. Guess who it is? And they guess every other Batman, including Adam West. And then Val Kilmer pulls his mask off and is like, it's me, Val Kilmer. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's you. And like, no one remembers him being Batman. They even guessed George Clooney. And like, he plays it for laughs, and like, he evidently had a running gag with Psych. And like, at the end of the series, like, he's watching a goodbye video, and it's like, we've worked in the same office for 8 years. This guy never has talked to me. And so, like, he had a sense of humor about it, and I appreciate that, because a lot of these celebrities take themselves too seriously. And maybe when Val was younger, he might have. But in his older years, he just cherished being around people and fans. And if you ever get a chance, watch the documentary Val. It was on Prime, and I think it still is. And it is about him, and he's in it. And he talks about, like, even while battling cancer, he would go to like these conventions, especially the ones that would be around Tombstone, and would just go and hang out with fans even while he was sick and dying. So
yeah, let's move into like his bio.
Yes,
here. Let's see who Val Kilmer was, the man. He was born December 31st, 1959 in L.A., Los Angeles, into a Christian Science family. And Christian Science was something he adhered to his whole life. He never strayed from that. Are you familiar at all with Christian Science?
I am. It definitely is an interesting branch of the Christian faith. Definitely more off the beaten path. They tried to not use modern medicine facilities.
Yes. So here's the basic, like, if you could break it down to one sentence, this is what they believe. Christian scientists believe that sickness and sin are not real and can be overcome through prayer and understanding God's laws.
Yes.
That's where they're at. And like, look, I'm not here to say whether, I agree, whether what I think about that, other than to say he kind of felt this way. There are things in interviews where he's talking about dealing with his cancer, his sickness, and how it mingled with this faith.
Yes.
And clearly it impacted him in such a way where Like, at the end of the day, your spirituality is here for you to somehow live a content life amidst the brokenness of the world.
Yes.
And this dude seemed pretty content in some pretty hardcore circumstances near the end.
So growing up, he lived next door to Roy Rogers.
That's insane.
And evidently Roy Rogers had his horse and his dog from the show stuffed and mounted. And he wrote in his biography that when he was 8 years old, he wondered if when his wife died, if she was going to be mounted with the horse and the dog. But she outlived Roy, so we didn't have to worry about that.
Lucky for her.
But he also lived on the ranch that the Manson family, like next door to the ranch that the Manson family, like occupied and committed a couple of murders at. And so, like, Val was living in some interesting times and places.
We're totally living in a simulation. I can't believe I live in a reality where Val Kilmer and Roy Rogers and the Manson family were neighbors. Like, that's just insane.
And theoretically, Angela Lansbury's daughter would have been close
She'd
to
been around.
there.
Yeah. Angela Lansbury, Murder, She Wrote. This mixes in somehow, some way. This is crazy, Cody. He was the youngest student, Val Kilmer, ever admitted to Juilliard at age 17. He co-wrote and starred in the play How It All Began during his time at Juilliard. Early stage career, performed in Henry IV, As You Like It, and Slab Boys with, oh my goodness, Sean Penn and Kevin Bacon.
If you watch the Val documentary, you get behind the scenes footage from that play because Val recorded everything.
Now, we recently did a documentary about Christopher Reeve, who also went to Juilliard. It's funny how the roles they make it big in initially maybe aren't what they think, what they're going for. So Christopher Reeves is a whole part of that documentary where, like, people said, hey, you're going to ruin your career by playing Superman. And maybe they weren't wrong.
Yeah.
He gets kind of typecast. Val Kilmer's first role is in the movie Top Secret, which is like a spoof comedy.
It is. It's like Airplane, but it's about spies.
Yeah, exactly. Which these movies were big in the 80s. It's strange, though, that movie was a big deal when it came out. Mm-hmm. Like, he's just right out of the gate. First movie. It's a spoofy comedy, which is not how we remember Val Kilmer. And that movie was, like, in the public consciousness. It was a big deal.
I own it.
Juilliard, early stage roles, Cody, love for Shakespeare. How do these influence him to his approach later in his film roles, do you think? Like how do we see all this? I think we do, but
even in the movie The Heat, which I watched last night.
For the record, it's just Heat.
I'm going with The Heat. Because Val elevates it to The Heat. But so there's only 2 moments in the whole movie that he smiles. And it is right before the 2 worst events of his life. Where, like, he gets in an open shooting match with the whole LAPD and then gets shot in the arm. And then he goes to see the love of his life, Ashley Judd, and Ashley Judd, without saying anything, tips that she's with the police and that he needs to go. And, like, you just see all emotion drain from his face, and he turns around and leaves. And, like,
dude, that scene, that's amazing.
It's an iconic scene, and there's no words exchanged between the 2 of them. That level of acting is what I expect from someone that is the earliest admitted to Juilliard.
Yeah. Somebody posted that clip after his death on X with just the caption, "You ever watched a man's heart break in real time?" And, like, that sums it up perfectly. Is you were in that moment with him. He was that guy. He was that character, and you're watching his heartbreak in real time. Like, just incredible stuff.
In a movie where you have Bob and Al, because that's what he called them, and two of the biggest names of acting all time, Val Kilmer holds his own, and then the scenes that he's in, because he's not in a ton of scenes, because it's usually Al Pacino being full Al Pacino and Robert De Niro being the Robert De Niro. He doesn't lose any starlight amongst those stars.
Yeah, let's move into the roles, because for me, even though Top Secret was his first movie and I remember it, I didn't watch Top Secret when it came out in the theaters. I was a little young for that kind of comedy when it came out. And a lot of my early experience with Val Kilmer comes from HBO, which was like the first real mainstream pay channel, like cable channel, and the movie Real Genius, which comes out in 1985, which is, it's kind of this cult classic. It has this cult classic status.
It does.
But what college does it take place at? A real college, or is it fake college? I don't even remember. Doesn't matter.
It's supposed to be like an MIT level college.
Yeah. It's like Good Will Hunting, except all these kids were there to begin with.
Yes.
And Val plays this quirky genius, Chris Knight, who we've already talked about, but it really like showcases again his comedic timing. I think there's an alternate reality where Val Kilmer does nothing but smart comedies.
I do think that is a natural component of Val Kilmer. As I've been reading through his biography, like there's just moments that I'm laughing reading, and I think that's part of who he is that like, he's an intelligent, funny guy. I
think there's something to comedic acting too, where we don't give it enough. Ryan Reynolds said something recently of he openly wondered why more comedies don't get nominated for Oscars, because there's somewhat of a disdain for comedic acting in the acting world.
Yes.
But when you look at guys that started off with comedy, like Val Kilmer, he's coming out of the gate with
Thomas Hanks.
Yeah, that. And then you think of guys like Tom Hanks, and it's like there's definitely something in comedy that's layered and deep and takes real skill. And man, Val Kilmer was the movie Real Genius. Like, he literally carries that movie.
Like, I can't tell you what the little kid's name is that's in it. I only remember Laszlo, outside of Val Kilmer, who played Chris Knight. But Laszlo ends up being Uncle Rico in Napoleon Dynamite. And that's like the most random fact ever.
Well, he's probably like the second most recognizable person in the movie.
Yeah.
Well, no, the teacher
is.
Yeah. But I don't remember much of anyone else because it's all about Val Kilmer in that movie. He's amazing in that movie.
So that movie is on every like other day when I get home from school. When I'm in high school, because Comedy Central is just re-airing like old comedies. Yeah. And Real Genius is one of those comedies that's like played more frequently.
Yeah. But let's talk about 1986. Let's talk about Top Gun, because Kilmer's role as Iceman, who is the rival of Pete Maverick Mitchell, Tom Cruise, this is what makes him a household name.
He only has 10 minutes of screen time in Top Gun.
So everything about Val Kilmer in this movie is crazy because it's written, the role's very thin.
Super thin.
He's just supposed to be the typical 80s foil. Blonde hair, blue-eyed bad guy, cocky, and all this. But they literally have to rewrite the role because of what Val's doing, acting it out. And so much so, like you said it earlier, it's one of the few 80s really like antagonist roles where you may not like him, his character, but there's like this weird respect for him. And at the end of the day, Val Kilmer, there was something about him, because I'm going to say this is him and not the character of Iceman.
Yeah.
This is just a quality Val had. You hear all these stories, like the one about him rolling up to the Doors tryouts, or where they were testing out the actors. Yeah. You read all these weird stories about him where he's kind of intense or off the beaten path,
eating a locust on the set of Tombstone.
but you never get the, like, in some worlds, being bombastic and odd, being an oddball, would mean a lot of people don't like you if you have a certain kind of personality. That wasn't the case with Val. And he brought that quality more so to the Iceman role than anything else, where here's a guy who you're supposed to not like, but yet he's charming. And at the end of by the end of the movie, if you didn't feel it in the middle, which I'm sure a lot of people did, like, you kind of like the guy. Like, Iceman is excellence in the present. Mm-hmm. Pete Mitchell, the Maverick, is potential. He could be excellent, but he's got all these things to work through. Like, in the story, Val Kilmer brings this depth to him where you're like, well, this is what Maverick wants to be. But yet likable, even though he's unlikable, he's acting unlikable in the movie. There's just this weird quality about guys like Val Kilmer who can bring this. I mean, I just have no other word for it than charm. There's like this thing we can't see, we can't measure, but just charm just oozes out of him, every pore. And Top Gun's great. He's so embedded, like I said, that it was hard to believe people wouldn't like him, but everyone did. On the set of Top Gun, he created Team Iceman during filming. Are you familiar with this?
Enlighten me.
He would pit the actors against each other in fun, competitive games to boost the rivalry between Maverick and Iceman, but he would do it in character. So he'd be kind of, like a butt munch. But he would set up these games, like whether it was board games or whatever, these competitions where he's like poking Tom Cruise essentially to like, he was always playing like 3D chess.
Yep.
He's not just method acting. He's not Jared Letoing. Like, look, there's no stories. He's method acting, but there's no stories of him, using his hands to crawl himself across the floor to go to the bathroom and make everyone wait for 40 minutes, right?
Yep.
It's not ridiculous. There's an intelligence to it, like a high-level intelligence, where he's not only making himself better, he's making everyone around him better. And that is the perfect definition of a leader. But because we have a weird thing with leadership, we don't understand most of the time that leadership's about relationship too. And so it's just amazing to me that he could be this weird, odd cat who's got all these eccentricities, and yet people love him. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that story in Top Gun was great. Do you have anything you want to say about Top Gun? Because he's amazing in it.
Honestly, he made volleyball seem really cool. I'm not good at volleyball, but I'm like, if I looked like Val Kilmer, I probably would be.
You got the dog tags, shirtless. Oh, man. Yeah, he's great in that movie. Obviously, that's his big one that really puts him out there on the map. Everyone knows who Val Kilmer is. Then in 1991, he gets The Doors, his portrayal of Jim Morrison. Obviously, an incredible feat of method acting. He learned 50 Doors songs and kind of just embodied the spirit of Jim Morrison, the rock icon, to a degree that even, as Cody said, the band members couldn't distinguish Val Kilmer singing from Jim Morrison's. Jim Morrison.
Yes.
Like, that would be like people mistaking me for, John Lennon.
Indeed.
Or Adele. I just couldn't tell. Dave sang that Adele song so well. He sounded just like Adele.
And so this Oliver Stone directed movie inspires Wayne's World 2.
Yeah.
Quite literally.
Yes.
Like it is Wayne's World meets The Doors.
Yeah. And then in 1993, and I suspect this is the one where most people listening to this pod remember Val Kilmer. His performance as Doc Holliday in Tombstone, widely regarded as one of his finest, mixing humor and bravado and vulnerability. It's often considered one of the best portrayals of a Western outlaw. I've watched this movie 100 times, Cody, and every time I watch it, it's like it just it dominates the movie now, where his performance, and we did a Be Kind rewind on this movie. You should go back and listen to it because we talk a lot about this. But maybe something I didn't say in the Be Kind rewind is when I watch this movie, I feel like his performance is so good that it's the one performance about a real individual where I'm like, this is way more entertaining than the real Doc Holliday had to have been. Like, there's no way the real Doc Holliday could have been this interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't even care.
Yes. And it's such a quotable movie. I did see the NFL posted a tribute to Val. And it was a player talking about why they played the game. And they're like, it's not revenge he's after. It's a reckoning. And quoting Doc from Tombstone. Tom Cruise, the Tomas Cruise that he starred in Top Gun with, said that Tombstone might be the best Western of all time and that it is one of the most underrated films of all time.
I absolutely agree. I mean, like, look, nobody's going to mistake it for Citizen Kane, but that's not the point. The point is when you watch that movie, you lose yourself into that story.
Oh yeah.
It's such a richly told story that focuses on all the right things about telling a story. Capture the audience. That's the most important thing. And they sell out into it. Everybody. And they play their parts. Like, there's a reality where Kurt Russell could have saw Val Kilmer hamming it up as Doc Holliday and tried to like ham it up himself. But he's so subtle and balanced as Wyatt.
Yes.
Next to Val. Like, he just lets him kind of take over. Like, Kurt gets his moment at the end. He hams it up a little bit where he gets his one moment. Like, you tell him hell's coming with me. You know, like, he really gets to ham it up.
Yes.
But man, that movie is perfection to me. Even when I say it's not movie making perfection.
Nope.
It's story perfection. Like, it's just so interesting and good. And for me, that's like his iconic role. For me, it's all about Doc Holliday. And the fact that he's not nominated for an Oscar for that is just an absolute travesty. I don't even care who won that year. I don't care who was nominated. I don't care how much they deserved it. The fact that he's not nominated is just atrocious. Atrocious. He gets Batman Forever in 1995.
People online are asking for the Joel cut or the Schumacher cut.
Yeah, I'm pass.
Because evidently there is a 3-hour version of this movie that you get a lot more of the psychology and the darkness of Bruce and the Bat.
Yeah, we did a whole Be Kind rewind on that one as well.
As we should have.
You can go back and hear us talk about that. I would encourage you to, if nothing else, but for how we talk about Val. There was a lot of conflict on that set. He was conflicted about taking the role himself. It does change his career a little bit.
Yeah.
Right in the middle, where there's this little window where they try to make him into an action star. He does The Saint, Ghost in the Darkness.
Classic movies.
Yeah. I'm here to tell you, I know people that swear by The Saint, that think it's like one of the greatest action movies ever. And most people have no idea.
It's Elizabeth Shue's best role.
Whoa! Wow! Leaving Las Vegas? The Babysitter whatever movie?
The Babysitter's Club?
Yeah, no. What was
Adventures in Babysitting.
Adventures in Babysitting.
Yeah.
The Karate Kid? Okay. Okay, let's move on. Unless there's anything else you want to say about his movies.
The Prince of Egypt might be the best cinematic Bible-telling story and animated story ever.
Yeah. Amazing.
The cast is amazing. The singing's great. Val is full Val.
In 2014, Kilmer is diagnosed with throat cancer. After surgery and chemotherapy and the radiation, he's left with a tracheostomy tube and significant vocal limitations. Now, we talked about how Christian Science played a huge role in how he approached his health. He viewed his illness as, quote, a suggestion rather than a reality, which I'll understand that we don't got time to unpack it. But you should definitely go check out the Val documentary if you want kind of more insight into that.
Also, all the tears.
Kilmer never gave up his artistic endeavors or his faith, even as he's facing these kind of immense health challenges. Cody, do you think his journey gives us a glimpse? Like, does that become a part of the strength of his character and his artistry as well? Like, how definitive, when people look back on Val, will this part of his life be, the sickness part? And what he did, because like he reinvents himself. He never stops being creative. He has like an NFT company. Like he's creating NFTs, he's painting, he's doing all sorts of things.
He is. And right before this, he's doing like a one-man Mark Twain show that he wrote and produced himself, and played across the country, Citizen Twain.
That's amazing.
And I think for some people, the illness years will be kind of a letdown, because it's about this time that like a cult Val Kilmer following just bubbles up. And it's like, if he wasn't sick, if he didn't have the vocal limitations, he might have been able to have a career resurgence maybe. But I do think people that are Val Kilmer fans will see that this is a good mentality to have. Like when you're going through tough things, like, I'm going to keep on living life, and I'm going to be present in the moment, and I'm going to do the things that bring me hope and joy. Reading his biography, he talks about how the sickness really, or the cancer and being sick, just really caused him to even be more present and more attuned to listening and taking it all in, instead of having to comment on everything, just being in the moment. And I do think that that's something that culture and society today could definitely take a gleaning from, of, let's just listen.
Yeah.
Let's be in the moment.
Yeah. That's well said. Let's end with this because Val Kilmer, let me just say, he's an actor he like defies easy categorization, right?
Yes.
Like, and I want to talk about this because it's going to lead to a question that I have for you that I think sums up his one of oneness. From his early breakthrough roles to his kind of artistic reinventions Val Kilmer remains committed to his craft his whole time, his kind of inner journey, if you want to call it that. Whether you loved him as Iceman, as Doc Holliday, Jim Morrison, one thing becomes clear when we're sitting here talking about him, and that is that his legacy is one of complexity and passion and immense talent. Just immense talent. And what I want to ask you, Cody, is we can look out there. We could have a whole show dedicated to be like, who's the next Tom Hanks? Like, look at the young actors out there right now. Who embodies his characteristics? Who's the next Val Kilmer? Is there anyone out there that comes close to his unique mix of like his range, intensity, and authenticity? Because I think you could do one of those. Like Tom Hardy, for say, might be able to rival the intensity of Val, but he doesn't have the other things Val has. Like, is there any other young actors out there that could even touch this guy?
Not in my perception of where acting is at this moment. Like you said, they can convey at least one aspect, but conveying the whole package. Like Chalamet is very talented, but I haven't seen him have like that energy that Val presents in a lot of his movies. And right now we can chalk that up to maybe roles that Timothée Chalamet has had, but like he would be maybe it, and it's a maybe.
Yeah. Chalamet strikes me as like a more subdued young Pacino.
Yes. Doesn't have to go the full Pacino.
No
one should go the full
Let's
Pacino.
hope he doesn't. He's looking for greatness, though, man.
He is. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention before we end this that, like, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, he brings such an energy to that role that it really helps RDJ to shine, and it really launches RDJ back into the stratosphere of, okay, maybe we can bring RDJ onto our projects, because he was shunned.
You like those first 20 Marvel movies? Then you thank Val Kilmer. Like we said, Val Kilmer made everyone around him better in every movie he was in. And so that's not a little thing, because that's the movie that brings RDJ back. And if it's anyone else but Val Kilmer acting there with him, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
I want to leave us with this. How about Val's own words?
I'm here for it.
So I don't know. I'm told this was an email he sent out to like fans.
Yes.
Like, did he have a mailing list?
So he had a mailing list that would send you like what new art projects he had been doing, just random thoughts, because he liked to share thoughts and words with the fans. And his website still has like a lot of blogs and stuff, and you can go there and look at him and look at his artwork and all that jazz.
Before I read it, I want to tell people this, because we're going to get serious here for just a second, if you'll allow us.
Yes.
To honor Val's memory, I want to talk. I'm a chaplain, and there is a chaplain I read who's a deathbed chaplain. I read a paper he wrote, and basically saying he's a deathbed chaplain means when someone is dying and they request someone of the clergy, this is the guy they send. And he said, I've been there for hundreds of people's last moments. And he said, what you find is that most all of them are dying two deaths: the life they had and the life they wished they'd had. And he talks about how almost everyone has a regret of not being present, of being too into the things that culture fools us into thinking life's about, instead of the present moments with the people we love. And so I just wanted to preface this with what I'm about to read. This is Val Kilmer's last message to his mailing list, his fans. Smile. Many exclamation points. Smile. Hello, my friends. I'm hoping that you're all in a place where you can appreciate all of the small joys that sneak up on us every day, like the sound of a friend's voice, or that odd and specific color of blue that happens in the sky, that shade right there, and now it's gone. Enjoy, have fun, and slow down and look and listen deeply to what's around you. You will be rewarded, I promise. Health and happiness, Val. I don't think there's a better way to end the show than that.
I agree.
So that's where we're going to end it. The world will miss you, Val Kilmer, I think. But take his last words as your lesson for this week. Be present. Take in the beauties of the world. Count your blessings, or your luck, or whatever you want to call it. And be humble and happy, friends. And we'll see you next week.
Pop culture bastard.